Mr. George.
How you going, mate?
Yeah, I'm good, man. I'm good.
What's happening in the world of Chappy?
What do we have? We had a track day this weekend, just a local club that does a fundraiser, once or twice a year. So that was cool. Had a hirer, a girl who was very competitive on a bucket bike, actually, a little 150. So I wanted to try a big track, and yeah, had a blast. So that was really cool to see. And it's actually a very old competitor of mine. It's his wife. So. Um, I raced against him 20 years ago, whatever it was. So, yeah, and he was far faster than me then and far faster than me now. But it's really cool to sort of see other people getting involved. So that was this weekend, and then this week's just been sort of tidying up the admin for that. It's been nice to sort of relax a little bit and yeah, start planning for the next couple of events.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we're not getting any riding done here. It is, I don't know how to describe it. It's just endless rain. It hasn't stopped raining for 2 weeks. It's,
That's crazy.
yeah, it's been, like I mentioned it last time, we've got floods up here, and
Yeah.
at the moment it's pouring, and I was a bit worried, about internet access and also the background noise. But I'm gonna see. We got to push forward, and I'm gonna see if I can just reduce the background noise if there is any issues with it. But anyway, here's what it is.
Yeah, I don't hear anything at the moment, so it's a shame that you've been so inundated with wet stuff. It's almost been the inverse. That must mean that we're going to get it in about a week. That tends to happen down here. We get about you guys get whatever weather you've had for a week or so. It sort of makes its way down to NZ a little bit later on. So we've had some stunning, beautiful days, and
Yeah.
yeah, big people wanting some rain soon. Farmers always complain whether it's too wet, too
After your luck, mate. At
dry.
least you're getting to ride. Here
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it is the time of year to do it, right? January, February, March for us is sort of more bikes on the road than ever, so which is good that people are out about.
yeah. Um, some technology. I did a little bit of scanning around because I've been thinking about this for a while. We
Yes.
what prompted it is we bought a Toyota RAV4,
Uh-huh.
and it's I just noticed the other day they reckon it's the number one selling car in Australia. I think in 2024 they sold like
Right.
5,700 of these things across Australia in a year,
Okay.
like some crazy number. Anyway,
Right.
the point is you go out and drive and it's got all the latest U-Butte, electronic devices and aids and things like that. And the thing even brakes for you, and
Yeah.
it's monitoring the car in front and things like that. When you drive in the garage, it knows how far you are from the front, from the
Yeah.
wheel. And oh man, it is just ridiculous. So I thought I'd do some research on what's happening with motorbikes. There's a bunch of articles around it, but there's some technology, that is emerging into bikes now. Radar assist systems,
Mm.
blind
Yeah.
spot detection, adaptive cruise control, which we're already experiencing with cars. I've never experienced it on a motorbike, but it's a pretty cool thing in a car. I know that. It's my favorite, actually.
The
Um,
cruise control.
yeah, the adaptive cruise control, like you adjust the distance behind the car and it just maintains that distance. And you just, if it's in an overtaken lane, you just pull out and it'll go past. If it's a slow car, it'll accelerate up again. I love
Yeah.
it. I think I'm a big fan of that one. I think that saved me from getting speeding tickets too, for
Yeah.
sure. But even cruise control, just cruise control, on the sport bike, I originally thought that was going to be, that's the BMW
Gimmick.
S1000 double R. Yeah, correct. It has this gimmicky cruise control. Man, before I swapped the switches out, I would use it all the time. And I reckon it saved me from tickets. So the other one is they're talking about collision warning as well. But it's all emerging, and they talk about bikes that have already got radar assist.
Mhm.
Yamaha's Tracer 9 GT, CF Moto, their
Yep.
800T,
Yep.
Ducati Multistrada V4, the BMW R 1300 GS, and the 1290 Super Adventure in KTM's fleet. What are your thoughts about the emergence of all these technologies on bikes? Because it's more than just ABS, and cruise control. It's just a whole bunch of stuff that affects the bike's forward movement as well. Like it will apply brakes and things to motorbikes.
Yeah, it's really interesting piece, and as a person who gets a lot of flack for driving European vehicles and have done for quite a while, um, what I noticed when I had, an Audi or now I have a Volvo, and the driver aids in those things were years ahead of the Japanese, specifically in that cruise control. And so I've got a 2015 Volvo, and it's got adaptive cruise with automatic braking and the distance set, so you can set up to 5 different distances to follow the person in front. And it's also got an automatic braking feature that below 30 kilometers an hour, if it senses something in front of the car coming at the car at an alarming rate, it will um, depress the brakes to lock, to full stop, to stop you, in theory, hitting a pedestrian. So if you're driving at 30 kilometers an hour or less and a pedestrian rolls out in front of you, the car will automatically apply full brake to try and, in an attempt to stop you hitting the thing that's in front of you. So I've actually pulled up to a bush, dropping off my kids at school, and pulled up probably a little bit too fast, and the car has braked for me and locked up because I was encroaching on that thing. Well, it was coming towards the car fast enough, and I was below that 30k an hour speed limit. So that was really scary because the kid's like, "Whoa, what did you do?" And it was the car doing it itself. So um, the ride that I partook in from Sydney to Melbourne, we were on all the new BMWs, so GS13, S1000, and yeah, the cruise control specifically on that GS13 was really interesting. Play was really fun. Put the cruise control on, hands off the bars, but it had blind spot warning on the mirrors. So a little mirror had a little orange light that come up saying there's something there. The adaptive cruise was a little bit hard for me. I needed a bit more time to sort of get used to that. So it worked really well following if you stayed in your lane. As soon as you kind of changed lanes, I couldn't quite understand what was going on there. So I needed to probably fiddle with that a little bit more. I only had a day on it. So um, the speeding ticket, but yeah, totally agree. In my cars, it's the same. I think it saved me for more tickets than just putting it on the cruise control, and it's got that sort of 5k range from if you're going up a hill, it'll let it drop down 5 below and then speed you back up, etc. So I think that safety piece, the creep, the long cruise, fatigue, it's so much easier, so much nicer if you don't have to constantly sit there. And I think arm fatigue particularly, you can get out and relax and shake them off and stand up and all that kind of good stuff. Like,
Yeah. I can bike. That we got the like at the school bikes. I don't know if you've heard this story. It's got cruise control on it. I think Dave was there. He actually saw this. We had
you
gone.
riding?
Yeah, correct. So I'm
I've
right.
heard the story.
Yeah, right. I'll tell it anyway so that
Yeah.
listeners can hear it. We'd gone out and I'd used the cruise control and set it, and I don't know what speed it was. It might have been 100 kilometers an hour or more or
Yeah.
something to go out and do that change lines drill.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Right, so we're going out there and working with students,
Taking it
pointing
easy.
out
Yep.
all the different stuff. So basically, it's not doing track time. It's just inspecting parts of the track,
Yes.
for a reason. So then I come back in and it retains the setting of it, and then because we've already introduced to the students, so we just keep riding. Now,
Yeah. Didn't turn the bike off. Yep.
correct, yeah. So the cruise control is actually activated. Is switched on. It's retained that speed setting in it.
Sure.
Then you're riding around. Anyway, I come back into the pits and we slow right down, and I think it's like I don't know. I think it's a 40 kilometer an hour speed limit or something. They've
Yeah.
dropped to down there, and I bumped the resume button, and it's in first gear. That, that thing, it went from like I don't know 40 kilometers an hour. Now I didn't do it intentionally. I just bumped it, and it went from like 30, 40 kilometers an hour and just revved out in first gear to get back to 100 kilometers an hour. And
Yeah.
it wheel stood entering the pits. I
Yeah.
shit myself. Like Dave's looking at me going, "What is wrong with you?" Like I'm an idiot because I
Yeah.
was. And to this day, man, one of my checks is to switch that cruise control off because
Because
nearly
it's a tiny, tiny wee symbol with a. I'm guessing they're all the same, right? Little speedo, a little
yeah, there is.
arrow. It'd be real easy to miss.
Yeah, there
And
is.
and it could even be that the light's not there
No,
until you turn it on.
correct. It's only there
Yeah,
when you resume. It's not there
yeah,
when it's not resume. It's that little switch on the left-hand bar.
yeah.
Anyway, that
You
was
can
my
see
big
how
one.
it's easily done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think about intervention by the bike and
Mm,
automatic intervention when it comes to radar and, obstacle avoidance by applying the brakes. Because when you mentioned it happened to you, putting the brakes on, going up to a bush,
mm.
I do wonder what you're doing hanging around bushes at a primary school. But other than that, the the it happened to me in the RAV4. It put the brakes on, but it put the brakes on quite aggressively,
Yeah,
and it was a bit of a fright.
yeah.
And I think about that in motorbikes. I go, okay, what if you're, because if you think about it now, if you're going to engage in some sort of obstacle avoidance, you consciously know what's going to happen. There's going to be a deceleration and pressure because you're activating it yourself. What if you're trying to, avoid an obstacle through steering and that
Mm.
thing breaks,
Hard.
quite abruptly and you don't expect it? I wonder what the effect of that would be.
Interesting. I had to do we won't call it a defensive driving course, but I had to do an advanced driving course as part of my previous job working for the rescue helicopter. So we had a response vehicle. If we were out and needed, we had to go to the servo and get some milk or whatever. All the vehicles had lights and sirens, and if you got the page, then you had to rip back to the hangar and then jump on the chopper. So for us to be able to drive and turn lights on, we had to do an advanced driving course. And during that advanced driving course, one of the key things that we were assessed on and instructed on was emergency braking and direction while emergency braking. So the first one was just brake as hard as you could, get the ABS to kick in and try and stop. And then it was be able to do that while dodging something.
Yeah,
So
owned, which is
uh,
yeah,
yeah, so the theory went brake as hard as you could, engage ABS, turn while maintaining the brake pressure, and let the car systems retain the braking force while you're changing direction, and then obviously straighten back up so that you move around the obstacle. And I was very strong with getting ABS to activate in a straight line, but as soon as I started to turn the wheel, I'd release brake pressure. And I suspect it's from motorcycling and trail braking because I know if I'm going to change direction, I need to reduce the amount of braking force that I'm
you're
using.
adding lean angle, aren't you?
On a bike, you are. On a car,
Yeah, correct,
not. So the
correct.
car system and car physics is lean angle doesn't change, and obviously, there is some change of force that's happening there, but you can. They wanted you to basically ABS it the whole way around. And maybe I was using a non-ABS approach, a non-ABS equipped
Yeah,
vehicle
right.
approach. And if you think about it with the physics of it, so yeah, I agree. And the wife gives me heaps of jip when I'm driving because if I see something, I very rarely brake for it. I'd rather move out of the path of traffic. So often I'll dive to the left or
Right.
just swing a little bit to the right without braking, and she's expecting me to brake. So they do the wife braking warning light beside you every other time, and
Yeah.
yeah, so it
Well,
would be interesting to see.
they have and I think BMW. That's right. From memory, recall where I first saw a discussion about it was when BMW brought out ABS Pro. They called it, which meant
Oh yeah,
which was ABS at a lean angle. So you can
oh yeah,
slam the brakes on, at lean, and on a racetrack, we don't have ABS, we turn it off. But
yeah.
out on the street, I wonder, there's got to be a relationship between that, lean angle.
Yeah, and when you think about particular again Europeans, I know the Germans Porsche did one of their promos was to do with ABS, and they had I just don't remember this visual, and I don't know if it was a video or a photo of other cars, 1 foot, 1 foot, one tire on tarsi or one tire on the dirt, and slamming the brakes on, and of course the dirt tire locked up, and that was a depiction of a standard car, and the Porsche had no skids on either, and it was able to work out that the tire with the least amount of traction, they could
Mm.
monitor that ABS wheel or that speed sensor enough and still get the car to stop in a straight piece of line, in a straight line. So yeah, it's pretty amazing what they can do.
Yeah.
Scary to test, right? Scary to test.
Well, you said you rode the R1300, the
Mm.
BMW GS. I don't know if you tried it, but I know on the one I got a 1200. 2016 model. And I remember a guy talking to me about it. So I went up here and tested it on the road here, and I found it very difficult to do. And that was slam the brakes on the dirt, front and rear.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh,
really
yeah.
aggressively slam it on because you cannot lock them up.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah,
No, we weren't on. I didn't do any dirt riding, but it was on knobblies on the tar seal. So that was interesting in itself. It's something I'd never really done any time doing. Um,
yeah.
and I actually used the opposite, the opposite technique, which was to try and get the thing to spin and slide,
Yep.
which it did really well. And yeah, scared myself once or twice, but actually had an absolute that thing's a weapon. That thing it should be banned, absolutely banned. For me, the cantilever front end was the weird bit. So when I did break, you didn't get that massive pitching moment
Right.
because it's a cantilever. It's got a shock in the front, not telescopic forks, right? So
Yeah.
that was bacon my noodle for the first hour while riding it.
Did you like it?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, as in, did I like the cantilever front end?
Yeah.
Did I like the bike? It made the bike feel way lighter because you didn't have this big pitching moment. The bike didn't rock and roll front to back, which was weird. You just expected the bike of that size to do it, and it didn't. So I mean, it was really stable, but yeah, hooking doesn't work.
No, not when you got the brakes applied. It doesn't. I always felt that because on mine it's the same. I tried
Yeah.
to explain to
Oh,
someone that it's they're kind of a wolf in sheep's clothing in terms of handling. I mean, they handle just magnificently for what they are.
yeah.
Um, but when you go into a corner and it just you can't get the front down, so it's
Yeah.
not quite the same. It's not going to hook
Not quite the
right the
same.
line. Yeah, particularly
So
if you
that
trail brake.
Yeah, that was the hardest. That was the bit that I struggled to adapt to. But I didn't actually think about it. Like it wasn't until I was like, "Why isn't this working?"
Yeah.
Well, I looked at it and went, "Well, physics don't work with that." So just change your style of it. But yeah,
Do you know,
the, the,
one big thing about it, and I've mentioned this, and we'll definitely bring it up when we talk about braking.
mm,
We did some, and I didn't even know this. I went out and did some comparisons, and it was basically, I think I did 5 runs with each bike with the double R, my bike, which has
yes,
got T-drive front discs and
yeah, all
high-end
fruit.
Rambos. Yeah, like it's got some cool gear on it. And I went out and compared that, and we did 5 runs, 100 kilometers an hour,
Mm,
braking distance to zero. The GS outbroke the double R all day long
mm.
by around about 8 meters or something. I think it was 8 meters or something from a
Wow.
100 kilometer an hour stop. And the reason is that cantilever anti-dive front end on the bike seems to keep the back wheel on the ground, so you can actually do a two-wheel
Small back.
two-wheel braking action on the bike. So it's definitely, if I could stop like that on the double R, man, I would do whatever I could do to fit that. But you can't steer, so you know what I mean. It affects the steering. So I can see why the super bikes are the way they are because you want to be able to turn the corner. Whereas the brake, just if you look at braking alone, that GS is friggin' amazing with an anti-dive front end.
And that was one of the uh, biggest, I suppose not one trick ponies, but one of the biggest attributes of the Britain because it's got a cantilever front end.
Yeah, right.
And the guys said, it's one of the most stable bikes under brakes ever. And they probably didn't even realize when you go through the documentary that what that cantilever front end did
Mm.
to its braking. And it was very light, and it was, and it was, and it was. But I remember, I think Guy Martin wrote about it in his book when he rode the Britain that it's so different that you would almost have to be brought up riding a cantilever front end to really make best use of it. And obviously, braking must be one of the positive attributes, being able to brake a bit later because it's more planted under braking. But you have to give up a little bit because it obviously doesn't change geometry when you tip the thing in or brake as well. So there must be some compromise with it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, surely someone in MotoGP would put cantilever front end on it, right? Like
Well,
if
they've never done it. They don't do it, do they? They want the front to hook. Being they want it to steer.
Yeah, I'm assuming someone tested it and went, it's better there, but not good enough. So
Yeah.
they have it. I can only assume, right?
Yeah.
There must be some drawback to it. So
That's my experience on the GS riding on the
yeah,
rain.
yeah. And totally agree. Hooking did nothing. So
Um,
we talked last week. Sorry to jump in there a little bit about. I've just pulled up some information about gearboxes.
yeah,
Um,
me too.
and yeah, we're talking about sort of motor configurations and why there weren't, V12s and V8s and all the rest of it. And it seems, and I did remember that there was tiny little motors that to only make them work, and the racing sense they put big gearboxes on them. So, and this is just on a Cycle World history piece, and it talks about the racing of two strokes in the mid 60s, 1960s. And yeah, it says up to as many as 12 speeds were necessary to stay within a 500 RPM power band. And then the classic era of Japanese participation in GP racing ended after 1967. The FIM decided to limit gearbox speeds to six, which became the norm for production bikes. Yeah, so and it even goes on to say it's literally says this now makes us chuckle because a lot of cars have 8 or 10 speeds due
Yeah.
to emissions and consumption. So yeah, 1967 seems to be when they all got together and said 6 gears is enough, and I think that's possibly why the range of motor selection, or nine, all the cylinders sort of the diversity really petered off.
Hmm.
Uh,
They,
yeah.
yeah, I did the same. I went in and had a look and, asked the question why cars have
Mm,
eight, nine, or even 10 gears and bikes don't. And the answer I got was that cars operate a much lower RPM
mm,
and they need more gears for fuel efficiency and, as you say, emissions and things like that. Whereas a motorcycle operates at a much higher RPM and they get away. They don't necessarily need those extra gears. I had an experience because I was thinking about this specifically in that is there a problem with six gears and have they compensated with that as well? Well, I had a thousand DS, an old SDS, I think 1000 SDS. It was an old Ducati Multistrada,
oh yeah, 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 yep.
and
I
it
know the
might have
ones.
been
Yep,
2006. I can't remember exactly what year. It's an older
yep,
one. Yeah, the one with the it had the rubber belt or the canvas
yep,
belt.
yep.
Yeah, yeah, it did. It had that funny front end.
Pokemon funny. Yep,
Yeah,
yep,
but it had the rubber belts, and I always think because I did the cam belt
yep.
tensioning, whatever. Who
Yep.
invented, what maniac would invent a system where you tension it through sound? Like you pluck the belt
Really?
and you get a
Oh,
phone near it, right? And there was an app you could buy, and it tells you
really?
the audio resonance or frequency or whatever of the sound. So you go ding, 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 and you tensioned it based on sound. I go,
Like tuning a guitar.
it was ridiculous. Like,
It's
what maniac would invent that? But anyway,
in Italian.
yeah, I digress. You're right. You're right. How
Oh
complex
wow!
is that? But
And I've got a couple of Italian friends now, and I love them. But that's so.
yeah, let's make something super difficult to do. Um,
But at least there was an app. Imagine before the app.
yeah, true. Yeah,
What
true.
did you
It wasn't
do?
Ducati app. It was
No,
an
that
app
would have cost you
that
lots.
was about it was about tuning guitars and things. But
Wow.
anyway, I
Yeah.
digress. I got the bike and it didn't have a slipper clutch.
Mm,
And the gears had a large gap between them. And what would happen is when you do a downshift, right?
yeah.
So if you downshift at higher RPM, it would lock that back end up quite severely.
Right.
So I think there are other factors here that creep into the ability to be able to use six gears because, slipper clutches today have allowed you to do those, um,
True. Yeah. Yeah.
between gears that are a long way apart, which are going to be if you only got five or six gears, there's a bigger gap. The only way I fixed the Ducati rear end locking up was to re-gear it. I had to gear it down so that
Oh
kind of
yeah.
the gears got closer
Yep.
and made a huge difference because I stopped locking it up on the range, which was just a bit of a problem.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it got me thinking that maybe everything is designed around that concept, and they can, factor in limitations with other, things like slipper clutches. So
And and that is not a super modern concept either.
no,
The ZXR 400, one of the greatest motorcycles of all time, which is why I raced it. But when they came
that
out,
four-cylinder
they had a
monster.
little sticker on the side of it that said KBATL, I think. We used to call it the K Battle. I think that was even the technical term. And it was something like Kawasaki anti back wheel slip limiter or torque limiter, or it was essentially your first production iteration of a slipping clutch for
No.
downshift. Um, so yeah, that was something that they obviously tried, and I don't actually know how successful. I couldn't describe how it worked, but it was their attempt, and I'm pretty sure the late '80s Suzuki's did it as well in the racing scene to sort of enable a form of slip when you down change. And on those little bikes, you used a lot of revs. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, you often and you had to bang them down. Yeah, I think we would go down 4 gears into turn one at Manfield. So yeah, you'd use a few downshifts there.
It's pretty good technology.
And that was 80, late 80s.
Wow.
So
I didn't even
maybe
realize it was that
40,
way back.
50 years ago now.
Yeah, just a little,
40.
just a few. Uh, the what else do we have with the gears? They all like in the research I did. There was also, comments around diminishing returns. Adding more gears means smaller gaps. Not making use of the more broader power bands of motorbikes. So, because previously it was like you said, they put in, multiple gears to deal with that small power band or something. Shifting gear and complexity. They make a comment in the research I did. MotoGP riders prefer fewer shifts.
Yeah.
Mechanical efficiency and weight. More gears add weight and complexity to the gearbox. Extra gears increase frictional losses.
Oh, true.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and the other one now is they can focus on gear tuning, gear ratio tuning, can't they? There's a lot more flexibility with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but it sounds like uh, your overall gear ratios. So say you run a 14/46, pretty standard track ratio there. And with regards to your final drive, the GP guys will run that because they want the bike length to be a certain amount, and they want the swing arm pivot to be a certain angle or a certain offset or whatever the measurement is. And so they'll change the ratios in the box and keep the chain of sprockets the same. Whereas you or I will change the chain of sprockets because we can't change the gearbox ratios on our factory bike. So yeah, it sounds like that's sort of the way that they work because that's more beneficial than them
Yeah.
yeah, changing the swapping the cogs on the outside, they swap it on the inside. So,
Yeah, I was
uh,
talking to Ian
oh
Groom about that, and he
yeah,
he he said that words to the effect of or a description related to the idea that there was an optimal chain length and
yeah,
ratio in that area there, but we don't have the flexibility, like you say, to adjust the gear ratios within the gearbox. But he
yeah,
said there's definitely, it's not as simple as, move the rear wheel forward and therefore the bike turns better or something. Well, there's a trade-off in something else because it affects, spring pressure and affects everything. It's
yeah.
crazy,
I
crazy.
agree.
Yeah.
Another thing I just had a thought of there is motorcycling is possibly one of the few motorsports that the top level still physically change gear. So they've gone to a seamless gearbox, and we've obviously had quick shifters and auto blippers for a while. If you go and watch MotoGP from 2000, early 2000s to 2005, you'll still see blips. You'll still see the chip GP buys rev matching going down. I suspect they had a quick shifter going up, but definitely blipping going down.
Mm.
Now it's a seamless box, but they still move their feet, right? So they're still choosing by physically moving a lever when the bike goes up a gear or down a gear, up a ratio, down a ratio. Formula One, they haven't changed a gear for how long? Like when there's a Google, when was the last manual Formula One
But
car
aren't they
produced?
using toggle shift? It's still like it's automatic with toggle. Like they still control the point of the shift.
Right, maybe they do. I thought it was fully automatic, but I'm not a
Sure.
F1 guru.
If you watch, because there's video looking back at the steering wheel, the $1 million
Yes.
steering
Yep.
wheels they got on Formula One,
Yeah, yeah.
and there's a toggle there. I'm pretty sure they control the point of shift because the one thing comes up, like, and this is particularly in the motorbike world, a form of traction control is an upshift, an early upshift.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
yeah,
Semi-automatic, they're calling them. This
they're
is the
right.
generic response from Google. Because while there is driver input to change gears, all the driver is simply doing is pressing a button to tell
Right.
the computer what they want it to do. So yeah, so it sounds like they are a push button. Um, synchronous manual. Oh,
Yeah. Have you heard of the e-clutch that Honda has?
yep,
Oh yeah, you rode it with it. We're in Thailand. We had them
yep,
on the bikes there. Oh,
we did.
I got to tell you, I loved it. Once I sorted out the idea that it wasn't one or the other, it
Yes,
actually, when you flip it to e-clutch, you can temporarily disengage the clutch by pulling the clutch in.
yes.
And so you're just pulling the clutch if you're doing a U-turn. Because I remember trying to do a
Oh, yeah.
U-turn with the e-clutch originally without pulling the clutch in. It was not pretty. It was a little bit scary because it didn't slow down. And then as soon as I pull the clutch in, temporarily disengages it. So it's not automatic. It's actually a manual clutch with an electronic aid that activates it when you slow down and decelerate and then
Yes.
accelerate. I loved it. I thought it was like quick shifter on steroids.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I got caught out by it one time. We went to a beautiful, it was like a cave that had been cut out from running water that bounced off a rock and eaten into the wall. And it was
By
a
the way.
really like a big bowl. And it was a bit of a clay dirt road to get to that. And as I was riding, as we were departing, um, you're sort of trying to slip the clutch a little bit, and because like you weren't bimbling on drive, you were sort of in that half go spot. Well, the old e clutch was giving me whiskey throttle, like going out in, and it would give you a whole bunch of power and you didn't want it, so I'd let go of it, and it would go, "Oh, okay, way to go!" And then, so you sort of grab the clutch and regather. So yeah, didn't like when it was not perfect traction, that's for sure. So I quickly grabbed the clutch and never really let go of it while I was on the dirt. But on the road, at the lights, it was beautiful. You can see why someone's gone because they were Lamb's bikes, so CB 650
Yeah.
machine. So if you have a person who isn't that comfortable and confident with the clutch, that is a real safe, easy way for someone to learn or be assisted with that essentially at the lights pulling away.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then changing up was just like a quick shifter. So yeah, pretty fancy.
Yeah, winner, I think. The only problem is it sticks out the side of the motor.
Yeah, yeah, big thing. Yeah.
Now we were going to talk about uh, accuracy on track.
Mm.
Um, the thing where this really, and I've mentioned this before, where it really got reinforced with me and brought to my attention, constant attention, was when I was out there riding with Ian down at Phillip Island, and I remember specifically riding, through turn one, and turn one, turn two, they're pretty quick corners, and into turn two, and I figured I go, man, we're going to come back in, and he'll go, hey, it's pretty cool through there. And he comes, we go back in and he goes, your apexes are shit. What? I go, I thought they were pretty good. He goes, no, no. And his point was, you need to be on the line because accuracy through a corner, is based on the idea that the shortest way around a track is the straightest line. And the straightest line isn't a meter from the curb or, a foot from the curb or anything like that. The straightest line around that track is when the wheel is right next to the corner, and that's your pathway. So, this whole accuracy thing for me has been, forefront of my mind for a while now. What are your thoughts about accuracy on a track? How you do it? How much attention do you give that? And where and which parts of the track, when it comes to accuracy, do you need to give attention to? Because it wouldn't be all of them.
Yes, it's really It's a really great topic to sort of delve into because I would say I'm not super accurate.
Mm.
I wouldn't rate myself as the most accurate rider with regards to putting the bike in a specific spot all the time. Um, and it's been a long time since I've had to run at a really high pace. And I suppose assess yourself at that really high pace as well, right? So uh, you would argue, I would believe it's easier for me to be a little bit accurate when we're not sitting at max chat. Where I'm going with this particular chat is after the last, end of last year, I sort of had a really good couple of days with a really decent paced person that I was working with. And so it really put me into my, started to run me out of capacity a little bit with my riding. So it put me right up into the upper ends of my skills. And what I found really interesting was it highlighted to me where the weaknesses in my bike setup were.
Mm.
So when I was pushing really hard and trying to get a certain line, the way I was trying to achieve that, it was proving that I wasn't accurate. I wasn't able to get the tight apex, or I was apexing early, or I was doing some things that meant the way the bike was set up with geometry and suspension was blowing an apex or being wide on an apex. So I was having to work out how do I work around that because the bike is what it is. It's a stock machine.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting. And when I worked with this gentleman, he actually had a camera on at one stage. So video, followed me for a lap. And what stuck out for me was I believed in a certain part of the racetrack, I was climbing off the bike using a lot of hook to try and get a line. And then you see the video and you're like, not moving at all. I feel like I'm moving, but
Yeah.
actually I could move a whole lot more, and maybe that would change the line more, or I could make that benefit of straightening that turn out more, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, for me in this particular instance, the lack of accuracy was highlighting where I was not as strong, and particularly with reality, I thought I was doing something and it was helping, whereas actually I wasn't doing enough. And therefore, I could straighten this particular turnout more if I was willing to be more active.
Yeah.
Um, and an example, and this exact location was turn two here at Manfield. And really interestingly, I was over rotating on the bike, so that particular turn, more of my body was off on the inside, and so I felt like I was hooking more, but actually I was slightly off the bike too much, and so I couldn't hook because I didn't have a good lock on. I was off the
Right,
bike.
right, right. So you're off the
So
bike, but you're not in a hook position,
yeah,
which is weight
yeah.
forward, basically.
Correct. So that was really a really like, wow, okay, this is highlighting a weakness of this particular area, or that particular corner. So I always used to go back to if you can always hit the same spot at a certain speed, then if you wish to push speed, then you can't do it until you know you can be accurate at the speed you're going. So if you're doing the same speed all the time, but your line is different every time, you're never going to be comfortable to add speed
Right.
or try and carry pace at a different part of the turn because you don't know the result. You don't have a consistent product currently. So by adding another factor, there's no way to tell if it helped or hindered. You could add speed, but if you're not consistent, you never know. If you were consistently hitting the same point at a certain speed, and then you added 5Ks an hour, and you're still hitting that point at the same speed. Cool. Well, now you know you can do that every single time. So that was my initial thought with consistency. Now it's there's so many other factors that so many other benefits of
Yeah.
consistency.
You, what you alluded to there is, the idea that people hit different lines, if you can't hit at the same time, which is either going to be looking at different things each time or doing something different at different points each time or a combination of both. Um, how do you build the skill around that? What are your thoughts of that?
I think the location and visual information are so key. Because if you have known the location of where you want to begin, go through the middle of a turn and then complete the turn, and even if you wanted to, then the only way you can measure that is if you are running over those things or you're meeting those markers. But if you want to change something, then at least you've got a point of reference, right? And 3 points gives us a triangulation, so we actually have an understanding where we are in space and time. Two
Yeah.
points isn't enough, right? So having that third bit gives us enough information holistically, both left, right, forward, and aft. Um, and I think that's the most important part to being able to then adjust. So, um, yeah, you can pile on into something, but if you don't have visual information that you can lock onto or use, then how do you know if it was effective or not? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Um, it's interesting because you mentioned there's 3 points. There's the entry, there's the middle of the corner area. People would call an apex, and then there's the exit side of it. So if we can line those up perfectly every time, we're going to end up with the same line through the corner. Um, the talking about where you put your attention, there's some suggestion you can put too much attention on a turn point.
Yep.
And the reality is that you can hit, like if you draw the exit side of it, which is really critical, the lineup of the apex through the exit is what's going to, allow you to activate your throttle at the right time and get the drive out of the corner. But you can pretty much hit an apex from, a fair bit of variation when it comes to the turn in point. What's your thoughts about how much energy you give to the turn-in point versus the center of the corner and the exit of the corner in terms of, percentages of attention or something?
Yeah, that's a great question, and every corner is obviously not the same. There are some turns where I believe the turn point is super important, and that style of turn, in my mind, is like turn six at Eastern Creek in Sydney, where it is what I would call a bus stop turn, so straight towards it.
Little
There's a
90
spot
degree
that
turn
you
left.
turn, yeah, something like a 90 or less than 90-degree turn. That's sort of in the sweet spot 60, 70, 80, 90. Um, where, yeah, I mean, you could do a low line for a pass or a protective line, but I think that's almost very binary. And so it's like one, two, three. I would almost say they're even with regards to that, and particularly when it comes to braking. So, in that kind of turn, there will be an element of brake. So, know when I want to brake, when I want to be getting off the brakes and adding steering input, or whether I'm steering with brake on or not, apex and exit. So, I would say that's like a more balanced style of turn with regards to focus, so 33, 33, 33%, making sure I'm hitting them all.
Right.
Um, as soon as the brakes disappear and you don't have to brake into a turn, I think that changes everything. So that style of corner is very different. Um, and what I've noticed, I've been working with a lovely man, Dave Sharp, here in New Zealand. He's a New Zealand superbike rider, and he's one of the most accurate riders that I know. You can see it in all the photos when I get him to provide me footage or look at photos, and he's following the top guys in NZSBK. And the people who are in front of him are faster, but not as accurate as Dave. He is far more accurate when it comes to apex, specifically around that apex point. He's super accurate. What we have started getting into, and something I noticed again last time I rode, was I'm putting more awareness, or I'm trying to have more attention on my intended path to the apex and how early I can pick up that I'm on the desired line to get the apex.
Right.
So I used to worry about, am I going to hit the apex, and almost wait, not wait until I hit the apex, but I had to be quite close to know, yes, I'm happy with my line, therefore I can start getting back to the gas, if that was the style of the turn.
Yeah.
Working with Dave and working with other people at the end of last year, I noticed my apexes were early. So what I wanted to do was push the apex further around by, say, a meter or two. And so at the old apex point, that too early apex point, and so I was doing there, I put some attention on, if I'm 1 meter off the inside of the track at this point, that therefore means I'm going to hit the later apex.
Right.
So by being able to put attention on a pre-apex, that's what I'll call it, if my pre-apex, if my pre-apex location is correct, then I can start rolling on well before the apex. And so the sooner I could tick the box, am I on the intended line or am I at my pre-apex point? The sooner I could start rolling on, and that just meant my drive just got so much more, like you back the throttle, and my drive was getting stronger and stronger and stronger. So I started putting more attention, 60% of my attention on that location. Because that product, if I tick that box, I got the apex I wanted.
Yeah.
And then the exit was just a byproduct. The exit was those two things meant the exit was where I was going to go where the exit was. And you could even start playing around with if the bike was starting to slide, well, how much could I stand it up to regain traction? How
Mm.
much room have I got on the outside? I got heaps. Then let's get more aggressive and see how much room I can use coming out. And
Yeah.
it all led back to a pre-apex
So
location.
it's almost an additional reference in there, a pre-apex, as you call it, and then an apex. Um, so if you're coming up to a corner in that scenario where you're using that type of process, how much, I'm trying to get the right way to phrase it.
Mm,
It's a situation where you're giving more attention to that area there and not the turn point, but you're turning
yes,
when you know that they're lined up.
correct.
And there's an
Yep,
orientation visually through that second half of the corner that
yep.
guides the turn in without you actually having to look at that spot. Is that something that, creeps in here?
Yeah, so I think and it was sort of the same process. We started in a particular turn that we're working on, turn one at Manfield. I was working with this person, and we're trying to get this wider entry, a nice apex, and then driving all the way out because the next turn was a right-hander. So it's similar to coming out at turn two of the island, and then having turn three, which is another left-hander. So you want to use all that drive coming out because the
Yeah.
same next turn is the same direction. So again, we were trying to work out how do we pre-position ourselves to be wide on entry, and then once we were in that area, then we could let go of that information and start focusing in on that. Are we going to get the apex we want? We want that apex a little bit further around. So yeah, and it built off that, but knowing exactly where that late apex point was crucial, and being able to hit it crucial. That's the bit that you wanted as much accuracy as possible. Those other 2 points, particularly the entry, I focused more I found myself focusing more on speed modulation, i.e., how do I trail the brake to get the speed off so that I could then bend it in to get that late apex. So the location was less of important as speed and distance was for
Yeah.
me
Right.
because I
Right.
knew I was wide. I pull myself wide enough and then orientate off that apex
Yeah.
uh, and make sure my speed was good, right? So yeah, I would say there was less attention on that, more attention on speed modulation and linking to my late apex.
Yeah. Right.
So, and if you want to put a number, maybe it was 10% location coming in, 20% speed modulation towards the line, 30, 40% on the accuracy of the late apex.
Yeah.
And then basically, once you could let all that go, it was drive the crap out of it. Like that was,
Yeah.
yeah.
There was some suggestion. I know allegedly I wasn't there, and I can't remember who told me about it, but there was a student in one of the classes, and they were talking about straightest line through a corner and
Mm.
apex position and things like that. And they're an engineer, and they did some mathematics, and they suggested that a meter away from a tight apex, and when we say tight apex, we're talking 10 mil from the line, riding on the line basically.
Yeah.
If you're a meter out or some distance from it, then it's adding meters to the track. It's adding distance to your ride,
Yeah.
and if that distance costs you, a half a tenth or a tenth, the quickest way to gain time on a track is just be more accurate, so it's a straighter line at the end of the day. So yeah, I thought that was interesting. I'd love to know what the maths actually convert into,
Well,
what is.
yeah, and that would actually be something that could be worked out, right? You'd literally get out the pi r squared or whatever it is and work out how many more revolutions. Well, that's what you'd probably be able to work out. How many more revolutions of tire is the
Oh,
bike
yeah.
having to do to run that line?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And how
and if
far
we,
is it around one revolution? Like
right,
it'd be more
a
than a
long
meter,
way.
wouldn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's got to be
Yeah.
at an 18-inch rim,
Yeah, you would think.
17-inch rim with a plus tire. So yeah, that would be really interesting to see if you end up with 10 more revolutions in a lap. And even if it's say a meter and a half, that's 15 meters. You've gone further.
I'm gonna type it in and find out exactly what the distance for
Here we go. Yeah,
what is the die
rolling circumference
uh
of a
yeah, not the diameter, it's circumference, isn't it?
so yeah, the circumference, right? So what's the circumference of a 17-inch Metzler? K1.
Uh,
You have to put in a tyre size probably.
well, I did well. Put 17-inch superbike tire circumference tires, and it tells me that it gave me the formula. It doesn't give me the distance. What is it? Oh my God, it's going through. Total diameter. Now calculate the circumference, rear tire circumference. Convert. It's doing all the maths.
I'm going to say over 2 meters.
Okay,
My
here it
guess.
is.
Yep.
Summary of approximate circumferences. That ChatGPT just did all the maths for me, right?
Love it.
In front of me. The summary of approximate circumferences. The front tire, 120 by 70, 70
Yes.
is 1.88 meters. That's the front. And here's an interesting one, right? The rear, and this is only a 190 by 55 17-inch, it's 2.01 meters around. So if
Oh,
you,
I'm not.
yeah,
That wasn't a bad guess.
not bad. Yeah. In
2
fact,
meters.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, a 60 profile tire would be further too, particularly
Yeah. Yeah. That's a big. That's a big old hoop.
65 is there running in some of the ASPK.
So
Yeah.
you're 2 meters. So I yeah, and with spin. So yeah, it'd be really interesting. You could. There'd be data out there that you could see a person who you get an accurate person. You get a Mike Jones to say you have to hit every apex, do the data,
Yeah.
and then maybe this is something we should ask him to do. Do a lap where he misses the apex on purpose by a meter and see how much further he travels. You
Interesting.
take the accurate, take the time out of it, right? You don't want to get him to. I mean, it could try, but it would be easy to see how many extra rotations, even if you rode everything exactly the same. If the tires have to do 20 more rotations, that's
We,
40 more meters.
we got to do that. I got to talk to Adam and Mark because they're talking about data um,
Cool.
on a
That
bike.
would be a cool piece of data
Well,
and
it would.
very good thing to put in the classroom.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, one rotation, if it's 2 meters around the rear, one extra rotation per corner
Yep.
at Eastern Creek is 24 meters
Oh, width-wise? Yeah.
with a 190 tire.
Yeah.
One extra rotation per corner. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. But I know for a fact, for me, just being more accurate, and hearing that little voice of Ian Groom in the back of my head going, "Yeah, Apex is a shit," right? Has definitely knocked time off my lap times because I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
Something that struck me too, because I've experimented with this, and I remember talking about this to Dave. The For me, it feels like I've almost oversteered the bike a little bit, like I've pointed a little too far,
Mhm.
and then I'm accurate, which says to
Oh,
me,
right.
yeah, which was telling me that when I felt like I'm pointed, I wasn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like I was never quite there. There was always this little bit of
Hadn't
hesitation.
finished the steering input.
Correct. But it felt like I had. But now I find I'm much more accurate when I feel like I've just oversteered it just a tad. You know?
Interesting. Yep. And I would probably, I thinking about it now, when I was working with those young guys, there's 150 and 300 kids at
Right.
Sydney,
Yeah.
6, 9 months ago. The amount I had, my biggest realization was how much more physical steering input I was using throughout the remainder of the turn, like a lot more pressure for a lot longer. Um, but my accuracy went through the roof. Through the roof. I was so much more accurate uh, by doing that, but I had to put a lot of awareness. I had to physically do it. You had to be more engaged with your steering input the whole way through the turn.
Yeah.
Um, Given the speeds were a bit slower, particularly going in because we were throwing 300 or 150, mid-turn speed was not slower at all. And my mid-turn speed came up because of it, because I could put the bike exactly where I wanted to put it.
Right. Well, a
Yeah.
straight line, you're going to get higher mid turn speed, aren't you?
And I just had so much more feedback. I felt what the bike was doing more by being more accurate. And that's a different byproduct, right?
Yeah.
So you could feel if you had overstressed or run in too hot or were over braking or, yeah. So interesting, eh?
Yeah. The other one about accuracy, I think about is on those ones where corners and straights where drive is really important. How much do you actually gain if you're a kilometre an hour faster? Mid corner, like say the exit of turn 12 at Eastern Creek, or out of turn 2. Phillip Island, out of 12 at Phillip Island, an extra kilometre an hour there, what does that magnify into at the other end?
Yep.
Because it's
Yes.
more than a kilometre an hour at the other end.
Oh, and huge difference. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Compounding interest styles, right? So, Dave Sharp, we were working through turn two here at Manfield. It was very long, as I described it. Come out of turn one, not brake. Some bikes you got two gears, some bikes you just go up one,
Yeah.
pitch it in and roll on. We were working on a roll on, a stability issue, which turned out to be a roll on issue for Dave. We sort of talked through what he thought he was doing with the gas and was like, "You got data on that thing, right?" So, yeah, pull it up. It's like, "What does that line show, Dave?" And he's like, "Yeah, we're not really rolling on very good through there, are we?" No. So his roll on wasn't really existent. It was on, off, on, off, on, off.
Mm.
So the bike didn't feel good, and that was what he realized was his feeling, not necessarily his drive. So next day went out, changed it to a more consistent roll on, and it's a very hard turn to roll all the way through, but a more consistent roll on at the start and a pause, change of steering, and roll on again towards the end of the turn. Roll on rate changed, and the top speed around that turn came up by 4 kilometers an hour. So it came up by 4 kilometers an hour at the highest point. He dropped zero point 0.3 of a second in that sector from that one change.
A 3/10 of a second gone just by a 4 kilometre hour increase.
Correct. Because the turn is so long.
Right.
Yep. So,
You flat
yeah.
out feeling 4 kilometres an hour too.
Yeah. Good guys are.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Us mere mortals, 4 kilometres. Like in a car, you drive along 60 kilometres an hour, 64 kilometres an hour. Probably
Probably don't
feel it.
feel it. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. But that was great. And I think I've even got photos of that. It was a really good
Yeah.
visual. This is what we were experiencing from a feeling. He felt like the bike wasn't stable. Look at what was causing it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we changed it. What was the data? He put on a new tyre, went zero point 0.1 of a second faster in every segment,
Yeah.
but that one he went zero point 0.4 of a second faster, and he gave away zero point 0.1 for the new tyre. So he said he believes he gained zero point 0.3 just from changing what he did with that.
Yeah. Interesting. The whole being able to roll it on the edge of the tire is it's a big deal, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and he couldn't be accurate, right? Well, he
Yeah.
didn't feel like he was stable on the bike. So,
Do you do you ever strike this? It just struck me, the question. Do you ever strike situations where people don't roll off fully? Like
oh, absolutely.
they think
Yes,
they do, but they're not?
correct. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yep. Um,
What about fully on? How many riders out there never get full throttle? They think they are because there's wrist lockout.
Yeah, and I think the data, and I've overheard people, particularly high end people, talking about that as well. A lot of the superbike champions will look, or superbike riders will look at their data to see how much full throttle they use. And in a technical circuit, Morgan Park's a really good example. How many seconds at pinned would you get at Morgan Park on 1,000? Not as much as we think, particularly going down that hill. Man, it'd be really easy to think you'd be
Oh, yeah,
tapped
with
out.
a fast right-hander.
Yeah,
Eight,
yeah,
I think it is. Yeah.
yeah. Do we get flat there?
I think
Your
Mike,
data's who
I think
who's
Mike and Josh Waters do.
well, yes, again us mere mortals. I remember talking to I think it was Sloane Frost. They went through an issue with regards to speed, and I think that was Nixon, his son in Australia. And I could be misquoting the story, but they were really concerned about power. For some reason, they sort of were like, the bike's going okay, but it's not really keeping up, and we can't really find anything wrong. And um, like the data looks okay. He doesn't end up with the top speed, but he's flat. He's telling me he's flat, and they put on a new quick turn throttle, and there was a point where it was falsely binding at about 85%. So everything he was doing was perfect, but the throttle would stop whether it was something was in the way, and so the bike never got full throttle. And the way they found it was through the data. And they're like, the max you're getting is 85%. And
Yeah.
so they cracked the throttle to full throttle, and it said 85%.
Yeah. Wow.
When the bike wasn't running, and they're like, "Oh!" So I pulled the throttle housing apart, where the tube was. Oh, there's something in there. Fixed. So that's obviously,
Yeah.
a good tool there, a good learn. But the rolling off, yeah, and that's it's a really interesting uh issue's the wrong term, but when I find at the school you're working with a rider, particularly newer to the track, and who does a lot of road riding, a constant throttle is a real
Mm.
familiar feeling to a lot of those people. So they'll bend into a turn thinking they're rolling off, but actually they've rolled to a neutral throttle or a constant 10% throttle,
Mm.
and are not getting that full weight transfer to the front. Um, yeah, particularly a turn where you don't have to brake for, can
Right.
be really common. Do you have you ever found that?
Ah, definitely. I've done it myself. Like, I had to think about it. And
Yeah.
like I noticed that there were corners where I didn't roll off, and because I wondered why I couldn't hold the line with the guy
Oh,
in front of me, like riding with knackers or something like that. I go, oh, how come I'm not holding that same line? And I realized that I actually had a little bit of throttle on.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just interesting, an observation. But now, I'm much more conscious of it. There's a time and place to not roll it off fully.
Mm,
In the hay shed at Phillip Island, why would you roll it off? You would just delay it, kind of thing.
yep. Yep. Or a
There is a time.
pause.
Yeah,
Yep.
correct. But then
Yeah. Yeah.
there's also, a time and place to be off throttle.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have noticed it. But that roll on throttle, I know I got a 60-degree throttle on Bob, my double
Oh,
R
yeah.
here, and yeah, it's a game changer when it comes to. I noticed I mustn't have been getting full throttle either because I put
Right.
the 60-degree throttle on and then the thing starts wheeling. I go,
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah. Just a little bit of reservation, bit of self-preservation in there.
Yeah, and but also the physical limitations. Like I'm not the
Oh, yeah.
most flexible of people, and
Yeah. Okay. Right.
like and again, cracking, rolling the throttle on with your hand, particularly when your hand's
Yeah.
perpendicular to the throttle, rolling it on, and there's a lockout. You know, 90-degree lock.
How have you found? So obviously we talk about the screwdriver grip
Yeah,
a lot, um, and I posted up. I found a video that was not a video, a photo that was taken at the last track day, and it was really, I was like, oh, there's a video of you, a photo of yourself, and you sort of like, oh, that's cool. And then I looked a little bit closer at my left hand, and I'd never seen it before, where I was riding coming out of a right hander, and my left hand, the fingers were all off the bar. My fingers were like they were going for the clutch, all open hand.
there's
I
a
was like,
right
what?
hand corner.
It's the right hand corner, yeah. So I'm down, and it looks like I'm pretty much full throttle on the right, or rolled on as much as
Yep.
I was needing to. And it's really, I don't recall me being completely open palmed on the other hand. But what I do often find, because I all my bikes have got standard throttles. I don't have any. I think one of my high bikes has got a short throttle. The ZX4 standard fly by wire. To change that's quite an ordeal to get a shorter turn throttle on it.
Yep.
Need a new switch block and all that stuff. And I've found my technique, or what I end up doing on a long thing, is actually my wrist leaves the bar and I end up like rolling my fingers down.
Oh yeah.
Instead of being there, I let go of that part and keep rolling the throttle on with the top of my fingers, and that seems to be just try and stop that wrist lockout. And I'm used to little bikes that you flat a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a technique, and normally it's on that style of turn where you're hooking, and it's really confined for space. So
I have
I think
for me, once I kind of learnt to get, for me, the feeling for me is head over hand, my head
yes,
near
yep,
my hand. So I kind of, okay, that's that visual
yep,
reference. It's kind of like the checkpoint that works for me.
nice,
And the idea of just letting your arm and wrist form a natural position,
yep,
as opposed to, it ends up being a screwdriver type grip.
yes,
And I think that's the right way to, personally, I think that's the right way to teach it to people. Get yourself in a position which is inside the bike and forward, but let your wrist fall in a natural position, and it will naturally go to that screwdriver, and you'll end up having full throttle. It's when the problem for people is when they try and keep that 90-degree grip on the throttle,
yeah.
and that's not going to work. But I think
And
the other
sorry,
side is some people say, you need a screwdriver grip. I go, well, yes and no. I think it's not about a screwdriver grip. It's about being in a good position with your wrist in a natural place. Because I've seen people try and exaggerate that screwdriver grip.
yes,
And I
Yeah,
go,
when the elbows out.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I go, okay, well, you know, I think it's just natural position for your hand. Your body's in a good position. So,
Well, and thinking it through, I've had two decent fractures of my right wrist,
yeah,
and I suspect I don't have as much flexibility as I used to.
you're old.
And my that whole finger roll is a workaround or a way that I've been able to continue rolling on because the wrist stops.
Yeah.
Particularly that movement there is something I'm lacking in. So, yeah, yeah. And if it means I'm not putting pressure on the bar, then it's got to be good, right? So,
Yeah.
um, if your fingertips are doing the work, you can't really be holding on to the bar super tight. But
Got to be locked on.
I hope. I hope.
Yep. Well, I gotta talk to Adam and Mark about that because I know they've been talking about data on bikes and getting specific data around a bunch of stuff, and I think this is an addition to it. I want to know how many extra rotations. If you're a meter away from every corner, how many
I,
rotations extra?
and that's such a controllable experiment.
Oh, for sure.
Um, so yeah, and you can take speed right out of it and just measure distance. And then you could even, or you should be able to even work out how much faster do you have to go to do the same lap time.
Yeah. Make up the distance.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because the average speed on an accurate lap, say it's 100 kilometers an hour, the average speed on that other lap might be, say, 98 kilometers an hour. So therefore, you got to do 2 kilometers faster everywhere on average just to stay with someone being accurate,
That's
as
true.
an example.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That makes sense. If you're
So
riding
that's how
long,
much harder you have to ride.
if you're riding a longer distance, you would have to go faster to keep up to someone on a shorter distance.
It's speed, distance, time. That's all it is.
Interesting. Well, I think we've covered that topic pretty well.
Yeah, I like it. It was a great chat.
Yeah. Um, have you got a joke?
I do. It's a decent one,
Yeah.
decent in length. Quality, I think, is okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I really wanted to ensure that I got something, came out of the blocks with a bit of stamina, and we'll see if you invite me to bring another joke in the future.
As long as it doesn't invite, uh, I don't know. It's not touchy. A touchy subject would get you
No, I'm trying to
roasted
keep
on
it definitely at the
Spotify.
moment. It's not in a political space, I don't think. So here we go. I'm going to have to read it because it's
Go
yeah,
for it.
the detail. So once upon a time, there was a frog who lived in a lake all by himself. He'd been given special powers by a local witch, and one day he finally ventured out of the lake to get his first glimpse of the world outside. The first thing he saw was a bear chasing a rabbit. So he called out to them and said, "Hey, stop, stop. I'm a magical frog, and since you're the first two animals I've ever seen, I'm going to grant you both three wishes. You'll each take turns using them, and you have to use them now." Now, the bear, being greedy, went first. "I would like every bear in this forest to be female, except me." Ping, magical sound, and it was done. The rabbit said, "Thought about it. I would like a motorcycle helmet." And this confused the frog and the bear, but after magical sound, bing, there was a motorcycle helmet sitting there on the forest floor. It was the bear's turn again, and the bear said, "I would like for every bear in the neighboring forest to be female." Bing, magic sound, and it was done. The rabbit sort of had a bit more of a planned look in his eyes this time, said, "I would like a motorcycle." Bing, the motorcycle turned up, even though both of them kind of like, this is really weird. A helmet and a motorcycle for a rabbit? Oh, okay. Yep, whatever. But after the magical sound, the motorcycle was there. The bear took his last wish and he said, "I would like for all the bears in the world to be female except for me." Bing! Magic sound, it was done. The rabbit stood there, put on his helmet, and climbed onto his motorcycle, started it up, and said, "I wish the bear was gay." Started the bike and took off.
I like it. I like it.
I thought that was not bad. That was not bad.
That's very good. That's very good. I'd heard the animals in the forest ones before, but that it wasn't as classy as that one.
Wow, yeah, yeah.
Very,
I
very
started
cool.
reading. I was like, "Where is it? How was this motorcycle related?"
I
Exactly how, right?
I got to tell you, I bought a dog, a week or so ago from a blacksmith. I brought him home, and the first thing he did was make a bolt for the door.
Ah, jeez.
Okay, we're
Nice.
done. I got nothing
We
else.
are. Stick a fork in us.
Yeah. So
Cheers,
thanks for
mate.
your time again. And any news on MotoGP Academy, Mini GP Academy?
Yeah, so we have our first event on the 20th of February, which is next Thursday. Bookings are coming in really well, so that's it's going really, really good. So we're going to run the first ever session will be all have a goes. So just trying to get as many people to come down and check it all out. And get involved. We've got another date approximately a month later in the same venue. And then we're going to be heading up to Tokoroa, which is just north of Taupo in April. So that's going to be a sort of a 1.5 to 2 day event. So we are going to start moving around very, very quickly.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so really excited about that. We're going to assess. We've got a local little competition, the competition that my son Mark rides in, the Manawatu Mini Moto Club, have their first round of the season this weekend. So we're going to do some testing with some Delirios there and just sort of see how the layout works and how the format works. But we might be able to offer experiences in that realm during that meeting. So we'll see how that goes. And just today, I went and visited a property that had a private facility, somewhat like a little mini go-kart track. So we are looking at ways of being in other locations as well. So yeah, super excited. Lots of work to go forth and do, but we're started. The ball is rolling. Bookings are coming in. So can't wait. Apparently the MNZ piece, the ruling piece, is on its way as well. So yeah, we're sort of the trains are leaving the stations all in different directions, but we're making some progress. So yeah, super excited about it all. So yeah,
Yeah, very
nice.
cool. So for info about that, Mini GP Academy NZ.com.
That's it. It's all on there.
Okay. Well, see you next podcast.
Thanks so much, Georgie. Catch you soon.